the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network presents Vatican Insider with Joan Lewis. Each week, Joan brings you news from inside the Vatican and the Church around the world, as well as interviews and answers to your questions. Now, here's the host of Vatican Insider, Joan Lewis.
Well, I want to welcome my listeners to another wonderful edition of Vatican Insider, and it's always wonderful because my guests are always wonderful. And this week I have two guests, very dear friends of mine, Ashley and John Noronha. We've known each other for a lot of years. Yeah, how many years?
17 years.
17 years, wow, indeed. So they have some wonderful stories to tell us, and I'm going to talk to each one of them about their individual stories, and then, of course, how they met, and then the current project that they're working on, which is the biggest member of their lives. So welcome, Ashley.
Joan, buongiorno. So happy to be with you today.
Well, and likewise. And John, welcome.
Thank you, Joan. So happy to be on this program.
We do go back a long while. Yes. We've shared some wonderful moments. John, I'm going to start with you when talking about background. And you're an engineer by education, but as you write on the Truth and Beauty, that's your project on the website, you've gone from the lab to the classroom and teaching. So tell me about your diverse educational background and your journey to a classroom.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful journey of how we think something's going to fulfill us in life. And then when we trust God with our lives and our future, He has different plans which He unveils in His own time. So at one time, I loved anything to do with mathematics and engineering and logic. And then it's so beautiful and paradoxical that God allowed me to get the highest level of technology, heading up future technology initiatives for Verizon Global. And this is when I felt that here I'm building systems and not building people. But also, I had a crisis where I couldn't explain my faith to most of the atheists in the technology world in simple secular language. And so I didn't have any of the humanities in my background. So that's when I wrestled with God for about a year and a half and then pulled away from my dream job and ended up doing a master's in philosophy and then theology and came to Rome to do a doctorate in bioethics. And here I am, 17 years later.
I mean, John, that is so wonderful when I think of how I myself, and perhaps anyone listening to us now, how we might have been asked by someone who's curious about our faith, who is not of our faith, and they want to know why we believe something. And sometimes we can't explain it in good terms. Maybe the three of us can now simply because of our work. But even the average person in the pew who does go to Mass, who understands the faith and everything, you may find yourself lacking words. But now you have those words. So in this wrestling match then that you mentioned, God won.
Oh, He sure did. And He took me to a whole new level of my own journey in faith to get to a point where I can understand the faith with no contradictions and with a beautiful sense and spirit of continuity across all different fields.
Oh, how beautiful. Now, are you a doctoral candidate now? Or
yeah.
You have? Yes, you are. And you're studying?
So bioethics is my field of my doctorate.
Oh, such a necessary field today. Absolutely. We just can't separate biology and sciences from ethics. We really, really can't.
Absolutely.
Now, Ashley, tell us a little bit about yourself, your educational background. I know is in communications, relevant radio, still a part of your life, etc.
Mm-hmm. So my first profession was in international marketing, and I enjoyed that so much, but I just felt that I needed to be able to take accountability for my faith, and I wanted to go further in it. So I decided to do a master's in theology on the side as I was continuing my work, because I was a person who had gone to Catholic grade school, high school, and university, and still left saying, what does it mean to be a Catholic? How do I live that? And so, therefore, I did that master's on the side, and when I was finished, I was really surprised when I heard God saying, no, more. I want you to do more. So I started looking into what other programs might be. And then suddenly, I found the perfect graduate program, but there was one little catch. It was located in Rome, Italy.
Oh, what
Yes.
a shame.
Right? So John and I were preparing for marriage at the time, and so I called him. He was living in D.C., I was in Philadelphia, and I said, John, what would you think of Rome? And he said, whoa, let me think about that. Let me pray about that. He said he hung up the phone, and 30 seconds later, he was just washed with peace, and he knew. So the next thing we knew, not only were we preparing for marriage, we were now preparing for a move across the sea.
Wow. Well, I remember at one of our first meetings at your very first apartment in Rome, seeing the beautiful pictures of your wedding. So you had 2 weddings. So
Well, yes, we did, because we were married in John's hometown of Bangalore, India, at the Church of St. Patrick. And so we had this lovely wedding where we were able to incorporate traditions from both of our families, so this to bring both of our cultures together in such a beautiful way. But then we went back to the United States, and we didn't do a honeymoon per se, but we drove around and we visited friends and family, and we just shared our joy. And in every place we went, we had a formula. We would go to a church and have adoration, a mass of Thanksgiving, and then some kind of party.
Yeah,
so we got to
sure.
keep the celebration going. And actually, 17 years later, we haven't stopped the celebration.
Oh, you never should.
Yeah.
You never should. I have a little thing hanging on a door in my living room. I'll show you later. And it's all about Christmas joy, the joy of the Christmas season. And why should I take it down?
Mm-hmm.
Why shouldn't we have joy all year? And now that we are in the Easter season, we have to be able to explain why our faith gives us joy. When people say, why are you always so joyful? If part of our answer is, first among everything, is my faith, we have to be able to tell them why, why we have that joy.
Yeah.
And you're right, marriage, you keep it up and you share it with others, and perhaps the contagion with people who are thinking of marriage,
yes.
you never know. What did you first do when you came to Rome?
Well, we did a little bit of everything at first, and eventually I became the director of communications for a foundation here called the Holy Cross Foundation. And
Associated with the University
yes,
of the Holy Cross.
Exactly,
Okay.
to try to help priests from developing countries have the opportunity to study here in Rome. And then eventually John and I started teaching at some of these different pontifical universities, which is very close to our hearts. We both really enjoyed teaching a lot. And then we both were at the Vatican for a while. I at the Pontifical Council for Social Communications.
Yeah.
Exactly. And John with the Reform Commission of the Pope as a consultor. And we've just had a lot of adventures that we would never have expected, but we keep asking the Lord where He wants us. And at the moment, it seems He is asking us to be here. So we stay. But it's funny because people ask us all the time a very logical question, which is, what are your long-term plans?
Sure.
And they're very surprised when we say we don't have any, because we just feel like this is where we're meant to be now. But who knows what the Lord will say next month or next year or whatever it may be.
Exactly. And John, how did you link up with the various universities in Rome?
So initially, when I was doing my doctorate in bioethics, I felt that was a perfect bridge between technology and ethics. So ethics, basically not morality in a theological sense, but the ability to explain what is good or best for human flourishing from a purely philosophical perspective. And there was a huge void. Those who were in the ethical field didn't know technology and the other way around. So this was a beautiful way to be a ponte, a bridge. But then eventually, I was asked to start teaching for an American Catholic college's study abroad program, and then I was asked to be the director of that program. So that was a beautiful way to now use what I had studied all these years to be able to teach. But I decided I want to teach in a very integrated manner, to integrate all different fields together, no matter what subject I was teaching.
Sure.
Eventually, it was the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross that made a request to me that truly helped me see how God sees and knows even the deepest desires of our heart. Because when I left the world of technology, I had these pangs and longings to always be in touch with technology. And I stayed in touch and everything, but I thought I'd never get back to that. So when they asked me to teach a course that was called Technology from a Philosophical and Practical Perspective, I just couldn't believe it, that here I was able to get back to technology and teach something in a very dynamic and integrated manner to help priests and others be able to use technology for the good.
Communicator, we think of recent popes. John Paul was known as the great communicator. Mm-hmm. He communicated when he was a priest, and then a bishop, and then a cardinal. He knew communications was absolutely necessary to the priesthood as much as it would be to anybody who was a journalist or somehow in the media. You have to communicate. You have to know the truth of whatever your industry or field is, and you have to be able to communicate it well. And that I do know that Holy Cross is known for all of its communication courses. So a little bit of a background for each of you individually and how you've, over the years, have helped each other and inspired each other, not to speak of all the people such as myself. So now let's turn to your big project, the Truth and Beauty Project. So how and when was that born?
Back in 2017, I could say that it was born by accident in the sense that we weren't trying to create this, but it turns out the Lord was leading us toward it. So bit by bit, we were moving closer and closer. We were really inspired by Colossians 1:19 and 20, and the idea that all things are to be of Christ. They come to fulfillment in Christ, and everything is under his authority. And how can we then create a world, create a culture that reflects that? And we decided it was by working with individuals, because what happens is that individuals, if you talk about concentric circles, right?
Oh, sure.
They go home and then they affect their families and their neighbors and,
exactly.
and there's then the society and then the world. And so we created the Truth and Beauty Project as a way for people to come to Rome and have a week-long, what we call immersion. And immersion is a faith experience. So it goes really deep into touching the body, mind, and soul. That's why we call it an immersion. But we teach people a foundation of their faith. So we give them theology, philosophy, metaphysics, anthropology, scripture, but we do it all through beauty, because we all know how powerful beauty is and how beauty just goes right to the heart. And so the idea is that by equipping people to do this, then they now are firm in their identities as Christians, right, and then can share it.
Well, and they probably, words they never thought would be part of their life, like you said, anthropology, philosophy. Mm-hmm. Oh, philosophy always gave me the willies. That was like, I don't think I can do that or be one. Well, that was because I didn't know what it was about. So, sure. You do have to try. You wrote on the Truth and Beauty website, which I will be putting on my blog when I post the news of our interview. You wrote, since 2008, we've been living and loving the Dolce Vita in Rome. Speakers, media personalities, theologians, and pontifical university professors, we share a passion for the renewal of faith and culture. In 2017, we founded this institute to create the immersion with knowledge and beauty to teach what it means to make your life a masterpiece. We also offer a scholarship program, we can talk about that, made possible by wonderful donors to help set the faith of young adults from around the world on fire. Well, let's look at that scholarship program, because somebody coming here, this will cover a week of being in Rome. Is that what it's about, or how does that work?
So we have a scholarship program that we offer especially to young adults. So young adults between 18 and 30, because we know that time of life is so important to build that firm foundation. Yes. And it's hard to get that in life. Yeah. And so this scholarship program allows then young people within that age bracket to come from all over the world and to participate. So we just finished an immersion with 17 young adults. They came from 9 different countries. And it's awesome. I mean, it's such a gift, we always say, for us to be able to kind of sit in the front row and watch the transformation, watch what the Lord's doing in their hearts.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's a two-way street. I mean, you're imparting with all of your knowledge, your experience, your talents, etc. You are imparting so much to other people, but you have to learn from them. It just becomes a dialogue, and even, in a different generation. The scholarship does help defray some of the expenses then for these people who participate.
It covers their tuition, it covers their lodging, their food, etc. And then we also have a second track for everybody else. So any group, any organization can come to us and say, you design an immersion just for us.
Okay.
So we do that also, and we're preparing right now for a wonderful group from Colorado who this priest has this vision for his parish. He says, I'm getting ready to retire, but how can I keep my parish growing and going forward in leadership? And so he chose 20 people, 10 couples who he feels are leaders within his parish, and they range from about 35 to 55 years of age.
Wow.
And he's sending them to us to raise them as evangelists. Praise God.
EWTN, teaching the truth.
I'm new back to discovering Catholic radio. I think it's so wonderful. And when I have come to experience the joy that is found in relationship with God, I feel like I'm the richest guy in the world.
And I'm glad I tuned into your station today. I really learn a lot from the wisdom that comes across the air, and I appreciate God making that platform available.
EWTN is everywhere. EWTN radio programming is provided free of charge to over 500 domestic and international AM and FM radio stations. It's a great teaching tool for Catholics and non-Catholics alike. For a complete list of EWTN AM and FM stations across America, visit EWTNradio.net. At the bottom of the page, click Affiliates. EWTN is the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Vatican Insider. Here's Joan Lewis.
Welcome back to Vatican Insider and part 2 of my conversation with two friends who have been in Rome for many years, John and Ashley Noronha. Anyone in Rome with even a remote link to the church, people working in the Vatican, the Roman Curia, our seminary here in Rome, etc., will have at some point crossed paths with Ashley and John. They have wonderful stories, and together as a couple, their story is their Truth and Beauty project. What I'm hearing you say, too, is so amazing because all of these people, whether they come from a huge parish or the group of 17 you just mentioned, they're all going to go back and talk to others. So just to think of how many, even if you were only to multiply each of those guests by 3, it's probably closer to 5 or 10. That's a huge number of people who can be influenced, even though they were not in Rome, for the Truth and Beauty Immersion project. So that must bring a big smile to your face, I would think, after every group that you have.
Yeah, I think not just a smile, but the biggest, happiest spirit of joy that you spoke about earlier, because I think one of the aspects of the founding of the Truth and Beauty Project goes back to 2 crises we had in our life. So one of the crises was the fact that we couldn't have children of our own. And so we prayed and prayed, and after we couldn't have children, God gave us this gift of peace, but also helped us realize that we would have many, many spiritual children. And so this way we can dedicate all of our energy towards these programs forming, whether it's priests or seminarians or religious sisters and the lay faithful who may know bits and pieces of their faith, but now they come to Rome and get this deep, really holistic sense of the beauty of the faith and all
the individual threads of a tapestry.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I can certainly relate to your story because growing up, my generation anyway, the thing that you thought you were going to do was going to be automatic, was going to be marriage. And I wanted that. My mom and dad, beautiful marriage, 16 aunts and uncles, great marriages and so forth. And God had other plans for me. So I have 9 nieces and nephews, 28 great nieces and nephews, and spiritual brothers and sisters and children all around the world of all different ages because of my work in many, many different ways. But the people I've met in my work and the people that you meet, through what you do, I hope you're writing a book or something. I want to tell you, I was so struck on your website by your spiritual board of directors. You have an actual board of directors, very influential, wonderful, talented people. But tell us about your spiritual board of directors.
Yes, well, they take really good care of us, and they are sort of the wind beneath the wings of the Truth and Beauty Project. So one is Pope St. John Paul II, who you, of course, brought up as a patron of communication.
Sure.
And considering that so much of this program is about communicating the faith, sharing it, it was just very natural to ask him, to invite him to be on our spiritual board. Also, Pier Giorgio Frassati.
Love him.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I've known about him and his relatives. You must know the Gavronskis, Wanda Gavronska, and yes,
so inspirational.
Yes,
huh? Amazing.
And he will be canonized this summer.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact. And then you have St. Catherine of Siena.
Also a patroness of communicators and of Italy as well, which is, of course, where we're living, although our Truth and Beauty Project is based technically in the United States as a 501c3. We live here and we operate here. So she, as the patroness of communicators, is very important to us. And then St. Philip Neri, the Apostle of Rome, who found such incredibly creative ways to evangelize. You know, that's something that inspires us, the way that he wanted to show how good the faith was. He wasn't about just saying, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, that's there, right? But he found this ways to express it, to make people want to be part of it. And he brought out the joy of the faith.
Yeah.
And so we really try to do that in our work.
Yeah. And what's common through our board of spiritual directors is the idea that all of them transformed both the faith and culture during different times in history, which was the second crisis that we had to address. The fact that, so if we go back to the 14th century with St. Catherine of Siena and then St. Philip Neri, it was a combination of not only the faith but also culture that was in need of reform. And then you come to Pope John Paul II, who had communism, so many problems both in Europe and the world that he did so much to address.
Right.
And so the idea was that in 2017, there was also a new challenge. So with social media and TikTok and everything reaching so many at breakneck speed and challenging them with what they claimed was going to fulfill people, we felt that if we were only giving this dynamic integrated education to priests and those who come to Rome for higher theological, philosophical foundation, we have to share this with everyone.
Absolutely.
And bring that spirit that these spiritual board of director members did in their own time, their own way, but now we have to use our time and our means to transform society.
And John, I mean, that's a century after the enormous upheaval of World War I, and then the rise of communism, how many cultures were affected by that. And you look at, if we look back at Pope John Paul, a Polish Pope, we have a man whose country, when it was not a geopolitical unity, actually was held together by the faith. And really a very, very extraordinary story. Well, I hope your story and your life in Rome and your influence on people, I hope that many, many more are able to take advantage of this gorgeous project. Maybe I'll sign up for a week and see what I can learn, you know. So I did learn in an earlier talk before we began this interview that you will be doing the Camino in Spain.
We are. This is going to be our first out of Rome Truth and Beauty Project immersion. And so we are taking a group and we're going to be doing meditations every day and exegesis of scripture, and we're just really looking forward to the experience.
Oh, that has to be wonderful. I actually have a couple of friends in the United States, and they did the entire Camino.
Wow.
They didn't do part of it. They didn't do the last 10 miles. They did the entire Camino and only had a backpack.
Oh, wow.
That's all they had. She gave up makeup and things like that.
Right.
What they didn't feel was, essential. And you'd have to bring medicine or something like that. But the clothes you'd have to wash when you found facilities. You'd wash your hair when you found a little bottle of shampoo in a facility. So, but it has to be, of course, tiring physically, but so energizing spiritually. So.
And the goal behind that was to reach all people everywhere, to be all things to all men. and to reach people wherever they are. So if someone is not so prone to come to Rome for a theological experience, well, they may love nature, they may love physical activities. So this way it gives people that chance to come on this experience and then to experience the beauty of spiritual renewal too. And also we felt that we need to reach people with the latest technology. So we are using a local center in Rome with Catholic-controlled AI. So that anyone can ask any questions. It's not going to go outside of the Catholic rails, and give them any answer to any question they may have. So now no one can say we don't have the formation from the church, because here they can do what modern culture is doing, which is going to AI, but this is going to be fully Catholic in its approach.
Thank the Lord. Someday I'll fully understand AI, but that's one thing. I think I could define tenets of my faith much better than I could define in 10, easy words, AI. But, well, our time has come to a close, and I want to thank you both. And I make a big mistake every time I record someone, because I'm supposed to say halfway through the interview, for somebody who may have just tuned in, my guests today are Ashley and John Noronha. I get so involved in the conversation that I forget to do that. So, folks, we've reached the end of our time. I have been talking to Ashley and John Noronha, friends of many years. In particular, I want to stress, and will do so on my blog, their Truth and Beauty Project, obviously giving you a link to that. So we're in the Easter season, and I want to wish you both a very blessed continuation of this season and the joy of the season, a word that we emphasized quite a bit in this conversation. So, Ashley, thank you.
Joan, thank you. And thank you so much for your dedication to serving the church. It means so much.
It's my joy. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's such a great privilege to be a part of this. As Ashley said, you've been doing this for longer than we've been around.
Maybe longer than you've been on Earth. I don't know.
With so many popes and part of the history in the center of the church, so it's an absolute joy.
Well, God bless you, and have a wonderful Easter season and Camino.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
For more information on these stories, or to check out Joan's blog and to ask her a question, go to EWTN.com. That's EWTN.com. Thanks for listening to Vatican Insider on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.